Hello, I'm David. Welcome back if you know who I am. If not, hi, I'm David. I make videos talking about stuff that I want to talk about, media and art that I enjoy. This is my thoughts, theories, and reactions to episodes 17 through 20 of the Magnus Protocol, which you may recall is the horror podcast directed by Alexander J. Newell, written by Johnny Sims and Alexander J. Newell, produced by the Rusty Quill production company. And yeah, these are my raw sort of thoughts and ideas divorced from the fandom or other fandom theories. Obviously, I will be interacting with the fandom, but I want this to be my full thoughts straight off without any outside influence. And we'll see where I get on my own. And then I'll probably update whenever I have some new stuff from like outside. But yes, this is me. I turned off the light because it was too much glare in my TV. I got a bigger TV, so now it's bigger glare, but oh well. So, episode 17, Saved Copy. I have a lot to say about this episode, surprisingly. So, we're going to get into it. This episode is CAT 2RC 1147. Just a reminder, I will be doing the remaining like digits of the code just like as the dates because I don't want to read those out because those are just the dates. The description is doppelganger parentheses interdimensional dash slash dash murder. CAT2 is subject. As a reminder, obviously that two that category 1 means agent, so someone who is affected by the eldritch powers. Category 2 is subject, which is a domain place that is affected by the eldritch powers, horror powers, dread powers. And category 3 is artifact, so an object that is affected by the eldritch powers. And so category 2 is subject is like location. And so my thought is it's the therapist office, because that's where like things happen. This is rank C. I don't know what ranks mean and what they do, but I note them down at least just in case. The DPHW, death 1, pain 1, helplessness 4, and weird 7. I think pain should be higher, specifically because there's someone who is being hurt really much a lot. But that's fine. Helplessness 4, interesting. Weird 7, yeah, this is definitely very weird. The date for this event is November 30th, 1997, and the date of the catalyzation is April 4th, 2024. The author of this episode is Alexander J. Newell. The air date was May 23rd, 2024. Brief summary is man finds a murderous doppelganger, and the possible entity is the web slash none question mark. I'll get more into this. This one's a much harder one, but also a little bit easier to categorize. I'll get into that, obviously. So in scene 1, we begin in a train station where Celia wakes up seemingly on the tracks, and she hears the train horn, and she's able to like get out of the way. This seems to be her second time on the tracks. It's definitely the second time we've seen her in this location. Last time was in episode 11, marked, when she wakes up in the train station. And she seems very surprised by it. She's like, again, not again, not today. And I think the today, not today specifically, it means about the date that is mentioned a little later. So in scene 2, they're in the break room, and Celia's apologizing to Sam about missing a date, and I assume that's the date that she's like, why not today or whatever. We're still not sure about. I'm still not sure about that, but you know, that's all I have right now. It's alluded that she had to go somewhere. She had to find a sitter, and then there was no trains available, so she couldn't get to the date that was planned between her and Sam. And the way that Sam's talking to her, where he's like, just don't make it a habit or whatever. Like, Sam, calm down. You've known her for how long? 2 months now? And you've been dating for a month? Like, dude, calm down. you don't you don't have the right to talk to her like that at this point of your relationship. So, yeah. He is losing some points for me. Anyway, she says that she went to Oxford, and it was not fun. And they flirt a bit, and then they return. Sam returns to work, and Celia lingers a bit in the break room, and she's talked to herself, and she says, "You're okay. It's okay." And I didn't really write anything much in the notes for this specific moment, because I wanted to mention now at least. Uh, when she's saying that to herself, it feels more like she's trying to calm herself after this like big moment in the earlier in the day when she woke up, and she's like, "You're fine. You weren't uh like run over by a train," and also like what she's doing, her mission, whatever her mission is, it's still going, and she's fine. She's just reassuring herself. So, um, yeah, that's what I glean from that moment. In scene 3, we begin with John/Chester reading out a statement. It is a statement and research assessment for candidate PD 553, and it's from the Magnus Institute in the Oxford Outreach Center. And it lists out viabilities for subject, agent, and catalyst as low. Obviously, this same sort of categorization from the Magnus Institute appeared in episode 9, Rolling with It. There, it lists like the possible viabilities range from none to probably high, but only got low here. But low is better than none, so there's like multiple things happening here, but it's very weak, I guess. And it recommends to keep him in jail. And the man, who I'm gonna call Old Darian, pleads to the Magnus Institute that it wasn't him. And so he goes into his story about he goes to anger management therapy at Dr. Dumfries, and he makes note of 2 people, which I'm making note of right now because I'm going to talk about it later. He goes to meditate and then suddenly feels a migraine. And when he tries to wake up, he sees that Dr. Dumfries is gone, and he stumbles out into an office space he didn't recognize, and a sign that says the Magnus Institute Outreach Center. An ambulance picks him up, and he sees his own like withered arms and sunken chest and a swollen stomach, swollen belly. And they treat him for malnutrition with complications. And he says that he thinks that they think that he has bulimia. And then, like, eventually he just gets better, anyways. And they're like, let's just let him go. He tries calling in at work at the quarry, but his call doesn't go through. And he finds that very weird. He's like trying to get a hold of them, but the phone call doesn't work. The hospital eventually just looks him up because he doesn't have any emergency contacts. They look him up and then send him to the wrong address, and there he knocks on the door, and then New Daring appears, and they like he invites him inside, and they like talk, and he notices some small differences in like the how they are. They look exactly the same except for like small differences, like um one has gray hair, the other one doesn't have as many gray hair. Glasses, no glasses. Beer gut, no beer gut. But overall, they look exactly the same, and they also have the same dad, just different moms. Um, and then, like as they keep talking, they find out that their dad were in 2 different places at once. Like he was he was dead in the coffin in the funeral the same day he was in surgery treating a tumor that killed him. So there's some interesting stuff there, but he doesn't question it much. And he stays in New Darian's house to recover, where he meets the housekeeper Sharon, who's very afraid of they. I want to say she was very afraid of Old Darian, but I think she was just afraid of Old and New Darian being there at the same time. Uh, but Old Darian only really noticed her being afraid at him. So that's something to note, at least. And during one night, Old Darian asked New Darian how he's managed to keep his anger in check, because if you remember, old Darian had anger management issues. He was in anger management therapy, and I didn't mention it before because it was more or less inconsequential, but he had gone through a very tough life because of his anger management. And so New Darian's like, I was waiting for you to ask. And he takes him down to a dungeon where I believe it's his father that he's kept in there who's being tortured. And old Darian's like, I don't want this. I'm angry, but this isn't me. And so he pushes New Darian down the stairs and leaves him for dead. Like he breaks his leg and arm, and he locks the dungeon, and he's like never opened it ever since. And he becomes New Darian for 4 whole years. During that time, he tells Sharon that his step brother, quote unquote, is gone, and he sends her off on a trip for like 3 years or something like that. I forget. And she never returned to work. Which at first I was like, oh my gosh, she never returned. But no, she just never went back to work, so she's free now of Darian. Which good. I wanted Sharon to survive. And then he says he's had enough practice living this life to make it unpleasant for the person taking on this statement, and that's sort of how it ends. I guess they just arrest him and then take him to a prison. In scene 4, Celia thanks the computer but says it's not the same. She's speaking to Freddy. I also didn't write it down. It's been a long time since we've mentioned Freddy itself or FR3D1. Um, but it's assumed that it's Freddy anyways that's doing all of this. And Alice overhears, and Celia says there's nothing useful here. Which, when they're talking, Celia and Alice are talking to each other, but Celia is talking about something else, and Alice is talking about something mundane. Like, Alice is like, "Oh, did you get like something good or something?" And Celia's like, "Nothing useful." And she's like, "Is it any?" Is it? Alice is like, "Is it ever?" But Celia is definitely saying nothing useful to her because she's doing something. In scene 5, Gwen is helping Alice with another JMJ error on Freddy. And Alice says Celia has seen Colin around, so she can probably call him for help. But Gwen says Celia's wrong, and he hasn't been in for weeks. Colin hasn't been at work for weeks. And so Gwen and Alice almost share things happening between them, but decide not to. And then the computer's fixed, and Gwen says it's fine until Colin returns, which she doesn't think will be anytime soon. And the episode ends. And now my note section is pretty long because there's a lot of things that I like. A lot, like this episode is deceptively interesting in terms of the stuff that it talks about, which is why I wrote a lot about it. First, this is of course the second train station wake up call for Celia, who seems very frustrated, and whatever she's doing in terms of multi-dimensional travel, which I'm sure she's doing, she has no control over where she appears, probably. And she's still probably working out the kinks of how all of this works, which is why she's frustrated when she appears at the train station and almost gets run over by a train. So that's what I get, at least. This flower was a bad idea. I thought so. My boyfriend gave me this flower and I pressed it. And I was like, "Oh, let me get something cute to like put my microphone," but it's like weird to hold on to, and I have to be fragile with it. So let's switch it out. Anyways, my notes on Oxford and Hilltop Road. So, Oxford obviously came up twice in this episode, with Celia going to Oxford and uh, the Oxford Outreach Center from the Magnus Institute. And so the first note I have is TMAGP 17, Celia goes to Oxford. There is a Magnus Institute Outreach Center in Oxford where Darian appeared from. And I, because of how similar this episode was to episode 114, Cracked Foundation, I was interested in if is Hilltop Road in Oxford, or when does Oxford appear again? And I stumbled upon a thing that I never knew about, which in episode 7 of TMAGP, Magnus protocol. Hilltop Center, which is the like a like I think it's like a thrift store or like antique store where like all the people that the woman hires bring in stuff and she's almost crushed by all the weird stuff. Yeah, that is in Oxford. Obviously, we knew that because it said it multiple times. The Oxford's people trust. Ugh, the company Oxford's people's trust, which like they kept saying it a lot, and so that was something that definitely. Did I even write down Oxford for episode 7? I wrote it down once. Did I even make a note of it in my notes section where I write my notes, where I do my notes? I don't even know. No, no, it's not in even my notes. So yes, Hilltop Center is in Oxford. And then I did a little bit more research and I went to the first episode Hilltop Road appears in the Magnus Archives, episode 8, where Hilltop Road is in Oxford. And just to like back it up, episode 19 through 20, Father Burroughs is in the Diocese of Oxford. And then every single episode where Hilltop Road appears in, it is stated that it is in Oxford. In episode 114, Anya works for John Hector Leddings in Oxford, and John Hector Leddings is also still present in Oxford in the Magnus Archives dimension. I never realized Hilltop Road was in Oxford, and I kind of do want to go through all episodes of the Magnus Archives and see every single mention of Oxford, which I honestly don't think I'm gonna ever do. But I'll definitely keep an eye on it as I'm re-listening to the episodes. But it's still like I never knew that it was in Oxford, and if I had known, then when Celia first said she was going to Oxford, then that would have been like flashing signals when I first listened to it. But now it's still flashing signals, anyways. Now that I'm going over it, and now that I did my research, and so is Celia using the dimensional rift that appeared in 114 Crash Foundation? Is she using that to traverse? Is that like we know that somehow Darian was transported from the therapist center to the Hilltop Road Center? No, sorry, the Oxford Center. And it's like, what what is she doing in Oxford if she's not? Like, why go to Oxford in the first place? Why does she have to run off to Oxford in the first place? So yeah, those are my notes on Oxford and Hilltop Road, and I still got a lot more. Okay, a little quick note: the date that Sam and Celia were supposed to go on, that was only Sam when was a film, not Pillowman. I expect because Pillowman's a theater. This is film, and he says it was a horror film. So I need to know what horror movie Sam watched. Just my own curiosity, you know. And uh, now I want to compare this episode with episode 9's Roll With It in terms of the Magnus Institute records. So in this episode, we have candidate PD553. Rolling With It had artifact CD137. I hope that eventually they like tell us what these like 2 letters and 3 numbers mean. Hopefully. We see that the Magnus Institute has branched out and has 2 branches. When we first saw it in Rolling With It, it just said Magnus Institute dash Manchester, and to me at least, that said no. That's follow the same sort of convention as head archivist of the Magnus Institute London, but that is specifically Magnus Institute, comma London. There is no other Magnus Institutes, but that's just something like address-wise for John's like statements. However, in the transcript, it was Magnus Institute dash Manchester, and now in this episode, it's Magnus Institute dash Oxford Outreach Center. So they're branching out into different locations, which is a lot more than what the Magnus Archives Magnus Institute was doing. Both had private and confidential written in the document, and both gave recommendations for different what's it called? departments. Uh, this one had Welling Mutar Materia Research Program, and rolling with it had catalytics for enrichment, applicability, and assessment. I already gave my thoughts about the catalytics for enrichment, applicability, assessment, the CEAA, maybe, I don't know. But the Welling Mutar Materia Research Program, Welling sounds like a location, but muta materia is mutated material, or I put it into Google Translate and I did the detect language and it said it was Italian, which meant changing matter, which, you know, fits. It's probably Latin. I don't know why it didn't give me Latin. I should have translated it to Latin. I just did detect language, but whatever. Still, it's changing matter. And so for me, Welling Muta Materia research program is to research about things that change, etc. And so, even though the subject, agent, and catalyst viability were low for this man, it was definitely like something happened to him. We have to research what happened to him. And they needed him to be incarcerated for that because he'd be like running away, or they need to have their hands on him. And so that's why they recommended him to be incarcerated for the Welling Mutar Materia Research Program, or the WMMRP, and the CEAA for the Magnus Institute, Manchester. The statement itself, I wanted to. There's something interesting in terms of the writing that I wanted to point out. There are two direct mentions as to the statement taker's state. So there are many mentions of old Aryan saying you as second person POV. Handful of times it's always like blah blah blah, or like you could hear this thing, or you could hear the voices or whatever. Whenever he's saying you, it tends to be like second person, like he's telling a story to someone, whatever. However, there are two mentions where he's talking to the statement giver that are very direct and special to me. We saw in episode 9, rolling with it, the person, the dice man, telling the statement giver uh, about the dice, and so it's definitely he's talking to someone. And so and in many episodes of the Magnus Archives, it tends to be someone writing this down, hearing the person like speaking it, and so like we always have this like second person you occurring. But the way that these two moments happen, he's specifically talking to a person, and it implies character. In the other statements, the yous that you have are second person POV, that implies narration. But these moments where he says you are implying a character, a specific character, or at least specific character trait, which I really haven't really seen before in the Magnus Archives or Magnus Protocol. For example, he's talking about anger management, and he says, from the look of you, you'd probably benefit from it, which could be a throwaway line, but to me, he's saying that to the statement giver and commenting on the statement giver's state of being, which I've never heard before in the Magnus Archives Magnus Protocol, like I just said. And so that to me is direct and something that I need to focus on, And then he says, in the very end of it, oh, you're gonna call the cops? I can make this very unpleasant for you. And that seems to be like a threat. And yeah, this one's more flimsy, but a threat specific to a person for what they want to do seems very direct as well. And so it tends to be less implying narration, but implying character or character trait. And so that's why these two moments stood out to me. And I was like, he's talking to a character here, not just statement taker. He's talking to a character that I might be talking out of my butt right now, and this will never come back. But this is what I'm getting from the text, and I just need to like make sense of it, The you mentions are too direct for second person and they feel important. Like I said, I might be just going insane now, but that's something I wanted to mention at least because I've never seen this before. Um, I didn't want to make a note, obviously, that this therapist, Dr. Dumfries, is not the same therapist as the therapist in To Making Adjustments. We don't get a name for that therapist, but we at least know that therapist is female or female presenting with a female voice. And we don't really get any pronouns for her, but it's definitely a female voice. And we get male pronouns for Dr. Dumfries. So, not the same person. You'll see on my picture that I just accidentally like wrote this later than it should have been. The wiki notes that two people in the Dr. Dumfries waiting room, the receptionist and other patient, resembles Martin and John. I wish I had not read that, but it is now, and it's now in my head, and I don't know what it means, especially because the proto Martin and John that we get are like in old Darian's dimension, so that's like 2 or 3 degrees of separation already from us. So I don't know what that means, but I at least wanted to note it because I read it, and unfortunately, I cannot not think of that. When Old Darian was transported, it seems to have taken much out of him. Obviously, like I said, this episode is very similar to episode 114, Cracked Foundations, and so in terms of interdimensional travel and et cetera, et cetera. Anya didn't have any body complications. So when I was listening to this episode, this new episode right now while I was riding my bike, I immediately after that put on 114 just to listen to it as for like a re-listen, just so I can get that sort of backup knowledge. And the bulk of the episode is her in the Hilltop Road and like being spooked by different things that are like flimsy. And then she goes downstairs and sees the crack, and 8 spider legs reach out and pull her. And then she wakes up in a chair and she leaves. And she's like, "What's happening here?" And then she finds out she's in a different dimension, etc., etc. We don't really get any sort of like she is in pain or something. And uh, she was like fine. But here, obviously, we see that old Darian is not fine after the transportation. His arms were withered. His body was hurt from this, and it, like I said, it seems to have taken much out of him, which we see a lot in like sci-fi, how or magic, fantasy stuff, how like teleportations may cause complications, and in terms of energy levels, it would make sense for me for uh I keep on saying Anya Kaleka, but Anya Kaleka is a different statement giver, so I'm just gonna say Anya uh Hilltop. Anya Hilltop uh was at Hilltop where the crack in the reality was, and easily was able to slip through. And so Anya Hilltop didn't really have any problems. But um Darian is probably in the transcript, it doesn't really say, in the episode, it doesn't really say where Dr. Dumfries' therapy office is, but I would hazard a guess that it's in Oxford, or at least close by it. And the Magnus Institute having an Oxford Outreach Center, where there is an Hilltop Road Center in Oxford, and Oxford is where Hilltop Road is in the Magnus Archives. There is very little coincidence that can explain all of that, and I can definitely see like Anya Hilltop slipping through, good. Old Darian slipping through, farther away from the crack, somehow being transported, somehow just that occurring, taking a strain on him because he's not right next to the crack, right? So, yeah, that's all that I kind of meant about that. Yeah. The entity here, ugh, uh, is it Webb? Is it Slaughter? Is it the end? Is it the distillation? Anger and torture were never really like covered in the Magnus archives. besides in sort of tangential desolation episodes in terms of like anger fueling you, etc. Like I can't even think of like any examples in the Magnus archives proper where actual anger and torture were things focused on. It was none. And unless I'm wrong, and you can let me know which episode you like they do that, but I cannot. I have listened to all 200 episodes so many times, and I cannot think of a moment where anger and torture is focused on as part of an entity. Either way, Hilltop Road is connected to the web, but not only the web, because in 196, this old house, we see examples in the past of other fears in Hilltop Road. And so, like, this obviously is an aspect of just eldritch horror in general. So I don't know if it connects to entity or not. I could hazard saying it is web because um, New Darien is using his anger, using his father to like get his anger out, which is terrifying. I could see a desolation as he's reveling in the pain that his father's feeling, and so very like desolation-y. Let me inflict pain on this person and draw power from it. The end, killing someone, slaughter, hurting people. It's there's multiple different things here, but nothing very concrete, which is frustrating, but in a very fun way, I want to say. I want to really briefly go back to the direct you that I talked about before. Um, and he says, I've had enough practice living in this life now that I could make it dot 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 pretty unpleasant for you. And so that moment, that's one of the most direct moments of you. When he says, I've lived in this life, I could I have practiced living in this life. He's talking about the world that the Magnus Protocol is in, which we know have eldritch powers, and that does that mean he is an avatar slash external? He doesn't show any examples of it, but like he probably could be, especially as like replacing someone could be an avatar of the stranger. I didn't even mention stranger for the entity because doppelganger, when I first saw the description, I was like, oh, stranger, obviously, because it's doppelganger. But no, it's interdimensional. So he's just seeing someone else who is him, and it's not the stranger replacing him, but it's just like himself, anyways. He could be an avatar of the stranger or whatever. But either way, I can make this pretty unpleasant for you is a avatar level threat. Like the vagueness of I can make this hurt with the promise of there are eldritch horrors here that give him power. So this man is probably an avatar or an external if we're going to use the external, if we're going to use the Magnus Protocol like jargon. We don't know. I don't think we're going to get any more about this man, but that's definitely like an avatar level threat, an Avengers level threat. And so at the end of the episode, it seems to me that Celia is searching for something through the statements, the cases. It feels like maybe she's searching for something, or probably she's comparing her situation because she says they're not exactly the same. So is it saying to her when she interdimensionally travels or whatever? What is she looking for? She's definitely looking for something. What is she looking for? And it seems that um, the Freddy is giving information to Celia, or maybe she's trying to fish for information or something like that. I don't know. She's definitely doing something. She's looking for something, and we see another JMJ error, which was last seen in 3 putting down roots, which I went back to check, and then the JMJ error specifically is that it won't accept commands, and the last time it fixed itself before Colin threatened to kick it. And now it fixed itself when Gwen and Alice refused to talk. And so to me, that suggests intent. Because it didn't want to get kicked by Colin. And it was probably trying to egg Gwen and Alice together to talk, and when it failed to do that, it just fine, let me just return to normal. That suggests intent. I might be personifying a robot, but there's definitely something in there, specifically because JMJ, does that stand for John Martin Jonah? Maybe they're fighting for control. Maybe they are becoming a little bit more sentient. I don't know. Those are my speculations. And now, talking about Colin, I still have more. Talking about Colin, I have a whole page about Colin because I needed to get this mystery started for me. So, in this episode, Alice says Celia's seen Colin around. But the last time we saw Colin was episode 10, Saturday night. And so, the mystery of Colin, I started breaking down the big important things that happened with Colin. In first shift, Freddy is written in German source code, which Colin is trying to fix. And then Colin knows that Freddy is listening. I specifically note that in the transcript, it says that it sounds like he's searching through desks and the computer turns on and he rushes over to turn it off, which is when he's saying, I know that you're listening to us, and he shuts it off. In episode 3, Putting Down Roots, after the JMJ error, Alice asks Sam to report Colin. In episode 5, Personal Screening, Colin has reportedly locked himself in his office and refuses to be near cameras. This is when Sam is telling Lena his worries about Colin. In episode 7, Give and Take, Sam goes to Colin to ask about the John email that he gets that gets him to talk to Jerry Key. And he gets into an altercation when Sam shows him his phone. And I note that at the very end of that, Colin says it's already recorded to, and it cuts off. I assume, of course, he's saying it's already recorded too much. In episode 8, Running on Empty, Lena has put Colin on mental health leave after the altercation between him and Sam. And then in episode 10, Saturday Night, Celia encounters Colin investigating something on terminals, which he tells her not to tell Lena that he was here. And I wanted to note, it's been 7 episodes since Colin last appeared, and it's assumed he's still doing investigations, as Celia saw him and keeps seeing him, and she saw him a month ago. Because I also went back because I feel like it's been so long since we last see him, because it's been 7 episodes. But it also, because the episodes move like slowly, and then we had the hiatus. Episode 10 happens March 9th, and this episode is April 4th. So about a month, a little bit more than a month since that last happened. So that feels a lot less long time since we've seen Colin, and more like it's been about a month since this all happened, which puts everything more into like perspective. So to me, it seems that Colin is coming in when Lena and Gwen are away and not looking in, doing stuff. And Colin is still officially away, probably still on health leave, mental health leave. But he's definitely doing something. And I think that it's interesting that this JMJ error moment happened because, like I've said before, stories, all the scenes have to have some sort of import, you know? And like, why is this scene happening? You know, nothing really changes with the characters. Yeah, maybe Gwen and Alice could have like that interaction of like, do you have anything to say? Do you have anything to say? No? Okay, but that could have happened in the break room. But specifically, a JMJ error occurred, and a mention of Colin of being around, but Gwen saying no, he's not been around. That is an important thing. So, yeah, this I am going insane. I and that is the end of my notes. That is the end of my notes. That is 6 episodes of notes for this one episode, which I swear to God I was so surprised about. But yes, episode 17, really interesting episode. Deceptively a lot of interesting things in here. And we shall see what happens in episode 18. Okay, I swear, I did not choose this shirt. It was just in the rotation for my pajamas. Anyways, I got new stickers for my notebook. This is my boyfriend and I as a dolphin and a seal. I'm the seal, he's a dolphin. Uh, and also Captain America because he's my husband. Do not tell my boyfriend that Captain America is my husband. Anyways, hello, welcome back for episode 18 of the Magnus Protocol. I'm going to be standing a little bit off to the side here so I can block the glare from the light so it's not that bright. So sorry if I'm a little too off skew, but that's just how I'm going to have to deal with stuff. I'm going to try to like shorten this because I know that episode 17 I talked a lot about it. And yes, there's good stuff in this episode, but not a lot, not as much as episode 17. So here we go. Episode 18, solo work. CAT1RC 2374. The description is memory, parentheses, derelict, dash compulsion. CAT1 is an agent, Violet herself, the corpse. Rank C, I don't know what ranks are. Rank C for corpse. The DPHW, death 2, pain 3, helpfulness 7, weird 4. The date of the event was March 20th, 2024, and the catalogization is April 10th, 2024. I don't think I make a note of it. So March 20th, 2024 specifically occurs between episode 14, Pet Project, which is March 15th, and episode 15, Well Run, which happened March 22nd, 2024. So this is something very, very recent. The author was Jonathan Sims. The air date was May 30th, 2024. Brief summary is the corpse tells a story of death, and possible entities are the lonely. In the first scene, Alice bumps into Teddy near the OIAR. I think this is like when she's leaving work, I think, or probably getting to work. I'm confused about that, but it doesn't really matter. And we learn that they're in the Royal Mint Court, which is the name of the plaza, I guess, that they work at. And Teddy's there for an interview specifically for a day job in that area that's not just the OIAR. And Alice is like, that would be really fun, if you got a job here. Alice really said, you've got a 9 to 5, so I'll take the night shift. And during that, she imagines like, oh my god, we could get drinks after work whenever you come, you like get out of work and I come into work or whatever. And he's like, yeah, maybe. And there's a little tick in the recording when he's saying maybe, so he's lying about that. And the scene continues. They're just like bantering, talking with each other, and then they leave. Nothing. I can't really discern exactly what exactly is the purpose of this scene besides showing that Teddy's going to be around a bit more for some reason, which is definitely something to note, obviously. But it's definitely like it feels like Teddy is kind of like being hedgy in a way, and I'll talk about it a little bit later. But yeah, that's what I'm getting from the reason why this scene is here. In the second scene, Sam is in the break room and sees Lena in there, and she's getting a coffee. And there's like awkward silence. And he's like, we don't really talk that much. And she's like, well, I don't speak with you often because you're good at your job. So why would I talk to you? Consider that a good sign. And he's like, yeah, I guess. And then he asks if Sela is going to come in, and she says she's not. She said she had a, quote, childcare emergency, so she won't be in. And so Sam's like, I hope Jack's fine. And she's like, she says, is that its name? She didn't know Jack was Sela's child. Sela's child was named Jack. She didn't know that, which means she's not an Avatar of the Eye, or else she would have known. So she leaves, and he is left feeling very, very awkward. And her voice all throughout it was very professional, very like customer service voice, like, hi, how can I help you? Is there any problem that I can help solve? I'm very familiar with the that kind of speak. In a third scene, we begin with the reading of a coroner's report from Dr. S. Rashid, and it is read out by Augustus / Jonah parentheses question mark, because we don't know exactly who Augustus is, assuming it is Jonah Magnus. Anyways, this is the second second time we've heard of Augustus. And I was really like not worried. I was like, when is he gonna come back? And I figured that it was gonna be something along the lines of like he only really reads out like old stories. That would make sense. You know, very like the first time he came was in episode 4, taking notes, and that one was set in like the 1800s, and so I would assume that he would only be there reading for like stories about the 1800s, but it is that's what I assumed. Obviously, there's nothing based off that because then it hasn't happened. Oh my god, I was right. It was episode 4, taking notes. Anyways, but yeah, so this is the second time we're hearing him, which was great to hear him. Welcome back. Welcome back, Jonah Magnus, parentheses, question mark, close parentheses. Um, and the coroner's report specifically is about the death of Violet Parker, who is 41 years old. She was a teacher. She died in Milton Court open space, which I guess is like a just like square, like a park square or something. And the estimated time of death was March 20th, 2024 at 3 a.m. Pretty early. And she has extreme malnutrition, tissue damage on feet, and then something about like her like I'm lifting up my feet last so you could see my feet. She had her ankle hurt as well. I didn't write that down, but I remember that. And Dr. Rashid uh, postulates that the cause of death was probably from either starvation, dehydration, or exposure, or any mixture of the three, which are very like work in tandem in terms of like things that can cause someone to die. And so in the examiner's comments, he says Violet began to speak to him after the autopsy while he was examining her heart and lungs. He's like, I do not know how she could speak when her thorax was open. He said thorax. Didn't he? Because I could have sworn he said thorax. And it's like, it's a torso. I'm looking up the transcript. Yeah, open thorax, which is that an anatomically correct thing to say? Body part of a mammal between the neck and the abdomen, including the cavity enclosed by the ribs, breastbone, and dorsal vertebrae, containing the chief organs of circulation, respiratory, at the chest. Interesting. I thought this was more. I mean, is it like torso as well? I mean, because I know it as like torso. I'm getting off track. And so he says that she starts saying this like story, and he's able to transcribe it. And he says there's no next of kin, and so there's no one really to tell her about her death. And he's glad that hopefully she will not keep talking, because if she does not keep talking, then he can just burn all this all these notes away and just say, I don't want to clear my hands of all this mess, you know. And so the transcript itself is pretty long, which I enjoyed. I liked that his portion of the comments was really short, and then a longer portion of her talking. Which for me always that generally always feels like um, it breaks a little bit of immersion in terms of like how is anyone going to remember that just from hearing it? Because I could not do that. I don't know about anyone else, but I could not do that myself. But it adds a little layer of horror in terms of there was something that horrifying that someone remembered almost exactly what was said. So I liked it, you know. And so in her story, she talks about a house on Church Street, and her mother, when she was younger, warned her that if she would go in there, her mother wouldn't help her get out. And the way that it was talked about, it was very flowy and dreamlike, and so it was hard exactly to decipher what meaning is, and time and like setting. She doesn't do any world building in her story, obviously, because it's a dream, I guess. Um, but it's like she's a young child, and it's like an abandoned house on Church Street. Don't go into that house. Danger. If you go in there, I'm not going to come after you. Bad parenting as well. Um, and she makes sure that her connections grow, so someone will go into the house for her. Like she makes a note of saying how she helps her mother, her sister. I think her sister, like some people that she names, making sure that she is helping them, so they know that they are with her, and she has someone that will come get her from the house, because she kept saying like, come get me, or like, I'll go after you or whatever, and it never really like get you out of the house, which added an element of horror. Like, what does she mean, come get you? Obviously it's very dreamlike, like I said. And when she was younger, she read Wordsworth's quote, "I wander lonely as a cloud." I think that's a poem. I don't know what that is. And the image stuck within her about like fog that's just cloying and grabbing on. And then eventually the Church Street house was broken down, but she says it was rebuilt inside Violet, inside herself, helped by her mother. And then she was sent here by someone in an alley. That's like a one-line thing that she says. That she, yeah, is that someone in the alley who sent me here? I don't know. Oh, I'm lost. Um, and she fears the house itself and being alone. And she says she will die in this place and no one will miss her. And the transcript ends. In scene 4, Sam asks Alice if she was listening, and he says it's a corpse that's telling a story about her death, like she was trapped in her greatest fear, which then actually killed her. And Alice tells him to just ignore it, and then rejects his idea and brings up questions to show how this case isn't really helpful to her, because he's like, hey, isn't this similar to what you experienced? And she's like, stop, I want to get through all of that, I don't want to pay attention to all of that, which makes sense. And Sam apologizes, and she's like, I know you're just trying to help. And then like Gwen slams out of Lena's office all angry and such, and Sam asks what's wrong, and she says it's the externals and they aren't fun, which I enjoyed that decision of trying to like communicate this idea, because I don't know if Lena told her she couldn't tell her coworkers, but I think Gwen fully knows that they would not believe her, like we'll see later. But she's trying to decipher if she should say something like, I don't like them, they're not whatever, or they're evil or whatever, like trying to have the best of both worlds that still conveys an idea without releasing too much information. The vagueness, like Gwen learning how to be vague, but still telling a lot from Lena. She says it's not fun. And so they're like, oh, well, what do you think? They're just, stockholders. And Sam's like, what's an external? And she begins to explain what they are, what externals are. And she said she connects them to the cases that they read, and she's like, do you notice like in the cases there's like people, places, or things, nouns, that like cause the bad things to happen? And they're like, can I get an example? And Gwen's like, Mr. Bonzo. And Sam starts laughing like hard, thinking that she was telling him a joke. And Gwen like storms off crying. She's like, stop. And she storms out crying. And Sam and Alice are like, well, Sam turns to Alice and he's like, she's like messed up. And Alice is like, just let her be. Just let her be. In scene 5, we have Sasha Sienna, the voice of Georgie Barker in the Magnus archives, voicing Georgie Barker in the Magnus Protocol, playing Peekaboo with Celia's baby Jack. And it sounds like it's coming through a baby monitor. Hi, Sasha, Sienna. Hi, loved you in the Magnus archives. Loved you in there. What the hell are you doing here? I know she was here since episode 8, running on empty. Did I get that right? Yes, I did. Okay. We knew she was here because Celia mentioned running on empty. She's playing peekaboo with Jack. And there is a moment, I didn't write it down because I don't really think it's of note so per se, but it's definitely like she's playing peekaboo and she says, who stole Georgie's face? Which sounds like a very pointed statement from the writer Johnny Sims, to us, because someone did steal Sasha's face, and then you know all that. Pointed. They know what they're doing. They know what they're doing. And Celia comes in and she's like, sorry, I had to go out buy food really quickly. She lies about why she needed to run. And we get a really loud, like, glitch tick in the recording to show that she is full on lying. And Georgie asks if Celia's spying on her for like the government, the Illuminati, aliens. And Celia's like, no. And Georgie's like, oh yeah, I believe you. And then she mentions Celia being in pajamas as she is leaving. She's like, you've been out all night with pajamas on? And Celia's like, I guess so. And the episode ends. So, some notes. They're definitely preparing us for something to happen to Teddy because he keeps showing up more. I actually don't really remember the last time he showed up, but it was recent within like the within the last 18 episodes. A wink. But they're definitely preparing us for something because he keeps showing up here. They want us to remember who he is, obviously, which is not hard, but definitely like establish, set up, pay off later, you know? And it does sound like he is trying to separate himself from Alice in the OIAR. He seems to not be responding to Alice's texts and seems to be avoiding interaction. Sounds like he's trying to get away from it. And as far as we know, he wasn't really in like the like eldritch horror zone of it. Like Lena and Gwen and maybe Colin are in. So I don't really know why he'd be doing something like that, but it's definitely something to note. Lena sounds very awkward, and so I'm starting to suspect she's not truly human. Now, she might be socially awkward, she might be on the spectrum, or she might have some form of neurodivergence, but maybe all that. Not knowing Celia's baby's name is normal, but calling him it is a little weird. And is it like eldritch horror weird, or is it like a boss who's a shut-in weird? You know, maybe she knows Jack isn't truly a baby. Maybe she knows that Jack is not a baby. I don't. Conspiracy theories. Celia, this is my corkboard. We're gonna pretend this is corkboard. There's red tape everywhere. Okay, there's red tape. There's red tape. Jack, the baby, is secretly, I don't know, Agamotto's child? I don't know what to think. I am second guessing myself again and again. She just might be a socially awkward boss, and Jack might just be a baby. I have to question everything. This episode is definitely the lonely. It's very like easy markers to show the lonely, like clouds, empty house, fear of isolation, fog. Everything is just running on the same wavelength as the lonely. There's no question about that. So a body reanimating seems to be a symptom of what's being done to Violet and the drowned woman, but not intended. So it seems to be that like whatever happens to them, whatever happened to Violet and the drowned woman, to kill them, to trap them, whatever, they began speaking about their experience when in proximity to someone or something that needs to hear. For example, Alice in the alleyway or the tape recorder as well, and Dr. Rashid with his notes, because obviously coroner's going to take notes. And so it seems to be that like this triggers all of a sudden as someone's there to listen. Not necessarily something intended to happen by whatever is doing this to these people, but obviously we do not have all the information, and we're just running on fumes and speculation. Sam really wants to experience the fears, but every time he gets to it, he just like backs off a little bit and is not doing it. You know, he definitely lost a bit more points today because he was a little rude to Gwen when she was trying to reach out to him about Mr. Bonzo, and when he tries to like butt into Alice's like deal specifically with like the woman that she saw, like he is like towing the line of being a little too much. But you know, he just really wants the fears. You know, he wants to experience the fears. And Gwen's about to break. It feels like she's still guilty about the deaths caused by Bonzo, and she doesn't really know how to deal with that, especially because she's not able to really tell anyone because no one would believe her at all. And yeah, that was this episode. Oh my god, I didn't even write anything about Georgie, didn't I? So it doesn't look like Georgie knows what's going on because she thinks that she's being stalked by the government, which is not a thing that someone who knows what's going on says. And she might be a conspiracy theorist in this world. I think this Georgie doesn't know anything. I don't think this Georgie is in tune with what's happening, especially because Celia is doing her travel thing without realizing or whatever. And Georgie's like, doesn't know what's happening. And so to me, that says that Celia is on her own here in this world, but still traveling to the other world. And maybe at times, not even meaning to, but can still, I don't know, send messages to the other world to get to Georgie to tell her, like, hey, take care of my son. But, you know, still, less information. We still get a little bit of clues. I mean, the pajama thing, that's a clue. That's a big clue because, like, her being in her pajamas means that more and more, alongside with her appearing at the train station, she has no control over where or when or how she comes to and from if she is from a different world. We don't know. But yes, that's that's what I got from this episode. And we'll see what happens next. Hello, welcome back again for episode 19. I did really want to give like a little like tour here because I think I forgot to do that in the first place. This is my Grifter's Bone. I saw Grifter's Bone and lived cloth thing. My boyfriend got it for me. He bought it for me. This is the flower that I pressed that I mentioned prior. I wanted to use it as like a microphone stand, but it kept sweating. The flower sweated. It's because it's alive. Here's a patch, the Magnus Institute patch. I don't know what to do with it. I don't know where to put it, but it's a patch. When he bought the things for me, it was off of a I forget who it was. It was a Etsy website, I believe. Um, and he specifically bought the patch, I believe, and it came with the Grifter's Bone, I believe. I'm not fully sure about that. And then he left me a message that says, "Your message. Uwu statement begins. Swissless watcher, turn your eyes upon this wealthy thing." Oh, well, that's what that says. I'm not lying. I'll flip it so you can read it. There you go. And that's what it says. That's my boyfriend. Anyways, and then we have, I believe this is a Kingdom Hearts thing. That's my boyfriend's. Yeah. This, I'm not gonna lift it up, is a thing that we built for actually D&D. It opens, has stuff in there. I got into crochet. This is what I do. Not crochet. I got into cross stitch. This is what I do. Oh, that's the back of it. This is the front of it. When I'm video editing, so I can spend the time, pass the time. And this notebook is for a secret project that I'm working on. Anyways, yeah, that's what I have. And then books. Take your leisure at looking at the books. These are not my favorite books. These are just really good books. My favorite books are outside in the shelf in the living room. Legos and some other toys. Just display. What's up here? This is my boyfriend's. This is Rivers of Light from Epcot. A thing. I don't know. Coin holder. This is from a recent Epcot thing. It's Figment. Oh my god, there's another one of those here? We open this. There's another one. There. Now they're together. This was a painting he made, I think, when he was in art school, and this is a display that my friend got me for my birthday of Michael Levy's cover of Under the Skin horror movie that we watched together, and the music that Michael Levy don't fall, and the music that Michael Levy uses in that movie I love. So I when I moved, I didn't get another display mounter, so it's just been there. I'm not gonna buy another display mounter. Anyways, end of tour, episode 19, hard reset. CAT13RBC1137. The description is transformation, parentheses canine, dash slash dash growth, parentheses crystalline. This is the first time that there has been a second parentheses in the like other part of the description. Actually, I wanted to fact check that statement I just did because I feel like we haven't seen any parentheses in the descriptions. But however, since episode 13, up episodes 1 through 13, all of them had brackets in the second part of it describing the type of uh, delivery of the message. So, for example, for episode 13, Futures, it is a voicemail. That's a voicemail is written in brackets. For episode 12, Getting Off, it's insurance claim within the brackets. But after episode 13, 14 and on, there is no brackets describing uh, the form of information, like how this information is online. Pet Project is was they were recording their movements for like posterity's sake or something like that. While Run was a voicemail from the caterer to this to the hotline, the tip off hotline. Antisocial is videos. The saved copy is a Magnus Institute document. Solo work is a coroner's report, and hard reset is a letter. All of those prior didn't have brackets describing the form of documentation that is depicted here. And this is the first time where we have a parentheses that's not a bracket, but parentheses to further illustrate the information in the description for this episode, the growth crystalline. It may be that they've forgotten to keep doing that, which is weird because Pet Project was after the hiatus, but they didn't keep doing that. No, because episode 13 was like 2 episodes after the hiatus, so I don't even know why they stopped doing it. There's a mystery here. It might just be lack of uh someone keeping track of that. I don't know. Maybe they decided to stop doing it. I don't know. I'm getting off track. So the CAT13 is both an agent and a catalyst. So the agent itself is Isaac Newton, the historic Isaac Newton, and the catalyst is the tree that is depicted here. The rank BC, still don't know what that means. DPHW, death 1, pain 1, helplessness 3, weird 7. All that makes sense to me in terms of like there's no death, there's no pain, maybe a little bit helplessness, but definitely very weird. I think it should be a higher weird, but you know, I think they're low. What's the term? Low balling. They're DPHWs, but whatever. The date of the event happened March 21st, 1684. And the date of the catalogization, oh my god, I cannot say that word right. The date of this recording, I guess, is April 11th, 2024, which is one day right after the last episode. Alexander J. Newell wrote this story. This aired June 6th, 2024. The brief summary: Isaac Newton's evil tree and possible entities is the eye, or maybe corruption. But I just wrote down the eye, and I'm gonna keep the eye. In scene 1, Sam and Celia are in the break room, and Celia is like reading through different papers, and Sam looks at them, and their readings on alchemy, transference, spiritual substitution of elements. And she's like, "How do you know all this?" And he says, "Oh, well, I learned a lot about alchemy when I was looking into the Magnus Institute." It's very that scene in the Avengers where they asked Tony Stark, "Since when did you become an expert in was it quantum physics or something like that?" He said, "Last night." Very Sam. That's very Sam. That makes sense for him. That tells me that the Magnus Institute in Manchester was interested in alchemy for some reason. Sam asks Celia why she's researching alchemy, and she distracts him by asking him about his research on the Magnus Institute. And he says he's probably going to drop it, but like with this conversation afterwards, he is basically like Celia's going to keep having an eye on anything related to Magnus Institute and that she will let him know about it. In scene 2, Chester/John reads out a letter from Robert Hooke to Robert Boyle, both of them in the Royal Society group, which I quickly looked up. I didn't write anything about it. The Royal Society, formerly known as the Royal Society of London for Improving Natural Knowledge, is a learned society and the United Kingdom's Natural Academy of Sciences. Oh, interesting. It's still alive. Yeah. So Robert Hooke and Robert Boyle are both part of the society, along with, of course, Isaac Newton, the Isaac Newton from he was the one with the apple thing, right? It's been a long time since I've been in school, so I'm like he was the one who had the apple thing, right? And Hooke is writing to Boyle because he's worried that Newton's newest experiment is blasphemous, and he wanted to tell Boyle about it. He reflects on the last time they enacted the protocol, and how it was the right thing to do to destroy, it seems to be, Hooke's previous work, or else there would be a pandemic. He said something about his own like microbio stuff, and it's like he was probably going to cause a pandemic to happen, and Boyle is like, hey, let's kill this right now. And so it seems to be like this protocol that they're talking about is an action taken to destroy scientific work because it may threaten something, may threaten lives, may threaten livelihood, whatever. And so he's basically saying, hey, we need to do this. I know that it's happened to me, and I didn't like it, but we need to do this because of the things that I've witnessed, which I will tell you about now. He says that Newton's work on vegetative propagation of metals has gone bad. Vegetative propagation, of course, means to grow like metals from other metals, which is the thing that you can do. And so Hooke's talking about how he would usually go over to Newton's house to like talk or whatever, to like talk about like science and stuff, which he knows that Boyle would disprove because they're not. It seems like Boyle and Hooke are not very like friendly with Newton, but he was still like going to meet with Newton multiple times. And this is the last time that happened. He was invited to Newton's lab with a promise of like new information, and the lab itself was in Trinity. It's just the location that I wrote down. And when he arrived, Newton's dog was just bothering Hooke a lot. And he's taken to the lab, and he sees a flask with about 30 gallons of bright liquid that are very hard to look at. Like he tries to look at it, he can't. If he looks on it, he gets like a headache and gets confused and stuff. And so Newton says he's surpassed Wilhelm Homburg and has created Arbor Philosophorum Perfecta, which I will talk about a little later in my notes. He passes him a smoked glass, which I like that detail for some reason. He's just a glass that still smoke so you could see it. So he passes him some sunglasses so you could see into the flask, and he sees a small tree submerged in liquid. And he thought it was dendritic silver, but was too perfect. So dendro is tree, so dendritic means like tree-like. Silver, so like silver that grows out like in a tree, but it was too perfect and it looked too much like an actual tree. And so Hooke says something about it, and Newton implies that it's living, but Hooke's very sure that it's entirely made of metal, so that doesn't make sense. And so Newton's like, I'll prove it to you. And he goes in and dips his hand in, ungloved, into the like substance and pulls out what looks like a fruit. And he's muttering a Latin phrase that Hooke doesn't really understand. He mentions something about it being like about Adam and Eve, which I will also discuss that later. And he feeds it instead of to Hooke because I think he tries to give it to Hooke, and Hooke is like, no, thank you. So he feeds it to the dog, and the dog eats it, and the dog goes to sleep. And then thin hairs start to grow out, creating roots, digging into the ground, trying to get to the ground. And then like branches and bark start sprouting out from the dog, and it's like a tree is growing out of this dog. And then the dog's eyes, just one eye opens, And the way that it's described is really cool because he says, "It looked upon me, and it knew me not as a beast knows its master, but as one man knows another." And he just like emphasizes how much that one eye opening of the tree slash dog slash tree dog opening its eye and looking at him knew him, and that terrified him. And so he was gonna do something about it. He was gonna take like some instrument and just bash the head in of the dog. But Newton's like, hey, calm down. Watch this. And he takes like a vial, dips it on the dog slash tree dog tree, and stops the tree from growing, and it recedes, and it's back to a dog. He's a dog now. What the dog do? And after that, Newton's like, you should take a break. And Hook's like, peace, and leaves. He like runs away. He says he not only runs from the lab, but also from the university that was in that they were in. And he writes the letter to Boyle, and he wants to work with Boyle to destroy Newton's work before it gets too bad, without Newton knowing that it was both of them that did this. He wants to reiterate that Newton is not evil. He only wants to destroy his lab so he can work in the future on something else. Like I like that he's like, yeah, Newton's not evil. He's just doing evil stuff. Once he no longer has that evil stuff, he'll be fine. He'll be fine. And that's when the statement ends. In scene 3, I believe Sam listened to this one, but we didn't really get like his reaction to it. Seems to be his reaction after it, but not to it, because we've seen multiple times, like for example in Saved Copy, when Celia like sighs and responds right after the statement occurs, or when in Antisocial, Alice, Sam, and Celia both respond to like react after the statement ends. We don't really get that. We get like a cut to the next scene, which is when Sam asks Alice to go to the break room with him, and she's like, "Why? I'm busy." And when she's typing, it keeps making like an error sound, and that's very. I want to say it's the very same one, but it might be a very similar one to the JMJ error sound that Alice got last episode. But she doesn't say anything about it being a JMJ error. She's just being frustrated with like the lack the error happening on her computer, and she can't do anything about it. And so Sam is like, ask her, do you think the computers are listening? And she asks him, what? And he's like, because it feels like he's being fed things deliberately that point to the Magnus Institute, and all the cases seem to link back to the Magnus Institute. Alice rebuffs him. She's like, no, stop. And tells him to like calm down and just keep working. He's like, okay. And that's the end of that scene. And the next scene, we have Gwen yelling at Lena for wanting her to go to an isolated location to meet an external without any sort of security, any sort of protection. And Lena says if Gwen can't do that, she should just quit. And Gwen suggests using Starkwell as security. And Lena says that they're not going to get Starkwell to come in because they're known to escalate situations, and she would not want that. That was like the end of that conversation. In scene 5, Alice is banging on Colin's office door, and he like responds through the door, and she's like, just open the door. And he does, and he wants Alice to give him her phone, and she refuses. And he says he doesn't want him to know how much they know, doing, quote, mommy and daddy Stassi proud, and slams the door in her face, and she storms off all angry. And that's how the episode ends. So, notes. I surprisingly wrote more notes than I thought I would, because alchemy is a lot. But here we go. Celia is doing research on alchemy. She didn't know that Magnus Institute did alchemy, so it was probably connected already to something that she was investigating. And so those are like divergent strands of ideas that are coming together versus it's I guess it's convergent. Yeah, convergent ideas coming together versus diverging. Yeah. All I'm trying to say is that it seems like she didn't know that the Magnus Institute was doing stuff about alchemy. But the reason she's researching stuff is because of the stuff that she's doing. And so it's really interesting to her that, oh, interesting, they're doing alchemy there. The statement itself, the I, but it's very loosely. Again, this is one of those episodes that's very hard to really connect to, like, a Magnus Archives fear entity, considering this may be of a different taxonomy. But with the eye opening in the dog, and knowing me as one man knows another, feels very I, and the fear that he felt about, like, the eye. The Latin phrase spoken that Newton says as he's dipping his hand in the water is, "But you must not eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, for when you eat from it, you will certainly die." So when I was writing my notes, I was just writing about the eye, and then I was like, okay, now next thing, let's look at the Latin phrase, and that was from Genesis 2:17 from the Bible, and that just simply empowers my eye theory, because the eye, it has like, obviously it's about the fear of bad knowledge, or like being seen, being watched, but also having bad knowledge, and like knowledge that you shouldn't want to have and stuff like that. And so, like, but you must not eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, is do not consume this, or bad stuff will happen to you, which is very eye coded, obviously. And so, like, when I was writing my notes, that just simply empowered the eye theory for me. So this tree is very similar to the tree in 3, putting down roots. However, there are some small differences. There is a slower transformation for Dr. Weber. His wounds are growing coiled, translucent strands that could be, like, probably as, like, roots. And there's a lot of mentions of roots, and he also feels lethargic, similar to the dog. But the transformation is definitely slower than the dog's transformation in this episode. And so it's very, like, weird stuff that seems to have parallels, but there's not enough information for me to, like, unite it. There's just parallels here that are definitely interesting and not coincidences, but something to look out for in the future. And now we go into, like, the parts of research that I have to do. Robert Boyle is a real person. He is a chemist. He is the person who created Boyle's law, which is P1 V1 equals P2 V2, which I did a lot in chemistry. I barely passed Orgochem. Robert Hooke is also real, who is a physicist, and he's known, among other things, to be an antagonist for Isaac Newton himself. I didn't write anything about Isaac Newton being real because he is obviously real. It's Isaac Newton, one of the most famous scientists in history. Wilhelm Homburg was real, who was a chemist who's had some interest in alchemy. His wiki page was not that big. Yes, I used Wikipedia for my research. What about it? I'm not doing any sort of academic stuff here. This is just my hobby. I wanted to look up what Arbor Philosophorum Perfecta was, and I got into a really interesting rabbit hole because of it. So, Arbor Philosophorum Perfecta is also known as Diana's tree, or the philosopher's tree. And so Diana's tree is a precursor to the philosopher's stone. I don't want to keep saying philosopher's tree and philosopher's stone. I want to say Diana's tree. And so Diana's tree is said to resemble coral, and it is dendritic silver that branches out and looks like tree branches from mercury submerged in silver nitrate. And Diana means silver among alchemists, so that's why it's called Diana's tree. And it does look like a tree, and sometimes there's also fruit-like amalgams. So there is a theory in alchemy that there is life in the kingdom of minerals, which is if there was life in the kingdom of minerals, that's why there are fruit growing in this kind of tree. And so I did a little bit more research within that wiki page of Diana's tree. And it turns out Wilhelm Hornberg also attempted to make Diana's tree, which to me was a surprise to see. But obviously, he was mentioned before of someone who did connected to the Arbor Philosophorum Perfecta. But when I was like researching it, I just looked Diana's tree, and there was like attempts to make it, and like one of the last ones was by Wilhelm Hornberg. And there was further notes that in the 17th century, there was an American alchemist named George Starkey, whose pen name was Irenaeus Philophilus. And he had a recipe for sulfic mercury that would create branch-like structures made of gold from mercury instead of silver, I believe. I didn't really understand that part. I'm not an alchemist, obviously. And in 2016, there was a copy of Starkey's recipe that was discovered in a manuscript written by Isaac Newton. And so when I read that, I was like, whoa, that's so interesting. That's so cool that like I found my way back to Isaac Newton from Diana's tree. So it was true that he probably was interested in alchemy, because there is no evidence that Isaac Newton attempted anything with alchemy. He had just interests in it. And he like kept his work secret, and specifically because alchemy was illegal in England at that time. And then I kept reading, and it said that any of Newton's work regarding alchemy was destroyed in a fire supposedly started by his dog. I read that, I was like, oh my god, that is so cool. Like I wasn't gonna question Alexander J. Newell for his inaccuracy in history, but I was like, history's weird, so I'm like, yeah, that makes sense that that could have happened. Obviously, like if I wasn't doing this research, I would not have known that Isaac Newton was interested in alchemy and that his entire stuff was burned down. But to have this in the story of Hook and Boyle talking to each other and being like, hey, we need to destroy his stuff before they get too bad. And then in history recorded, his stuff was burned in a fire, supposedly started by his dog. And what dog was there? The dog that was bothering Hook when he got in, that got turned into a tree. That dog tree, dog tree, burned down the lab, supposedly. Did he die in that? I didn't see. When I tried researching more about his lab burning down, the wiki page was very like vague about different stuff and time periods too. Like the artistic depiction was 100 years after the fact, or like less than 100 years after the fact, and not like a recent depiction of the like lab burning down. So it was confusing there. And but what research I did find was that the dog's name was Diamond. The dog's name was Diamond. Hook declined to tell us the name of the dog. That's so unkind. Some people also do say that it was not the dog itself. There was no question that Newton's lab was burned down. Whether it was a dog or not was in question, because supposedly. Some people say he just left the window open, which knocked a candle over, which set everything ablaze. The wiki also made a note to say that some people don't even believe he had a dog in the first place. So I don't know what to do with that. And yeah, I mean, that was the end of my rabbit hole. Just like I kept finding different stuff and like finding out that his lab was actually burnt down and was blamed on his dog, the dog that featured prominently in this episode. Amazing. Loved it. Loved it. So I wasn't gonna write that much about Colin this episode, because at least we know that he's alive and he's going a little crazy. And I was just gonna mention, I would like, oh, he's alive, he's going a little crazy, and that's it. However, he mentioned Mercury, and when I was doing my research, obviously Mercury was heavily featured in Diana's tree. Mercury was not mentioned at all in the statement, but Mercury is prominently featured within alchemy as as the thing to cause Diana's tree. And so I was like, I gotta look what that is. Also, when I went there, I remembered I had to look into what Stassi was, so I did that at the same time. And so Colin specifically says he can't let him know how much we know. Who's him? Who's him, Colin? And he says he says doing mommy and daddy Stassi proud, which I didn't really understand what it was. And so I looked up what Stasi is. And the closest thing I could find that makes sense is the Ministry for State Security in Eastern Germany from 1950 to 1990, which was similar to the KGB in the USSR. And so, if you remember, FR3D1 was created in German source code by maybe Klaus, or Klaus was obviously part of that. That's a German name. And so there's like some connections there of like Germany, German language, Klaus, Freddie, and Colin learning German, and no, and I believe that like it was mentioned that like the Freddie FR3D1 was created in the 90s, so this is like right off of the end of the Stasi, and so it could be an easy jump to like, oh, the state, the Ministry for State Security, the KGB of Germany created FR3D1 to spy on us. And then later he talks about balance for some reason. He says no one really cares as long as there's balance. Not too much mercury or the world ends. Not too much sulfur or we all go mad. And that's when Alice interrupts and she's like, "Are you good?" And then like he slams the door on her and she leaves. And at the end of the episode, but mentioning mercury is obviously a red flag in my mind because Diana's tree. And mercury used in Diana's tree. And then I was confused about the sulfur. And so I looked up the prominence of sulfur in alchemy, and it represents the middle state or the high and low, whatever that means, or process of dissolution and evaporation. Can't parse anything out through that, but the fact that he says not too much mercury or the world ends, not too much sulfur, you go mad. Sulfur it looks to be, in terms of like the middle part, sort of like something stabilizing or just continuing normal, such as dissolution or evaporation. What does that mean? I do not know. Definitely something interesting to think about. And so I wrote on the sides, is this eldritch horror induced insanity in Colin? Or is it something else, like real world conspiracy theory insanity? I think it's partially both. I think that he knows something is listening. I don't think he thinks that it's like some sort of eldritch being or eldritch horror, eldritch god powered being and like actual somebody listening. But how does he know that too? It's definitely like supernaturally influenced insanity, but backed by like conspiracy theory insanity, as far as I can see. I might be wrong, but that's as far as I can see. Nothing much comes out of it, but Starkwell is mentioned. Last time Starkwell was mentioned was, I believe, episode 4 or 5. Yeah, episode 4. Taking notes was the last time Starkwell was mentioned. Behind the San Pedro Square massacre, which we still don't know what that means. And yeah, nothing come out of that. The OIR being connected to Starkwell is definitely something big to note. However, not I can't really do much with that information, considering it is a security uh, detail that anybody could probably hire, anybody with money probably. But yeah, that is that. Episode 19 it was a really good episode. And I like how we're getting more about Colin, because obviously I was like, hey, what's happening with Colin? We seems to be gearing up towards something. And we're getting to episode 20 is going to be mark the 2/3 through of the first season, because each season is going to be 30 episodes long. So we're getting to the 2/3 through this first season. So things are trying to gear up. And I'm really excited to know more. Now let's take you to episode 20. Awesome. Episode 20. I'm losing my light, unfortunately. I was hoping to get home quickly from work, eat quickly, and then hopefully record so I could get the sunlight. But Florida's deciding to be a little bit rainy, and so it's all cloudy out, and I have to turn on my light, and now there's a glare in the television. And I don't like that. Anyways, I got tabs now. It's easier for me to navigate my notebook because there is so much now. We're in episode 20, and I've had to start new pages for the characters in the OIR and outside and the statement characters because the original ones ran out. So, episode 20, Social Stigma, CAT1RAB 2534. The description is transformation parentheses tattoo dash social media parentheses influencer. This is the second time we're seeing a parentheses, not brackets, in the second part of the description. The first time we saw that was last episode. CAT1 is an agent. Of course, it's going to be Inc. 5ol, Inc. Soul, Inc. 5ol. Rank AB, still don't know what that means. The DPHW, death is 2, pain is 5, helping is 3, weird 4. The date of the event and the recording event both happened April 12th, 2024. This is the first time that we are getting both the statement, the case. I keep saying they're statements, but they're actually cases. The case and the recording of it, or the catalogization, or what's happening in the YAR at the same date. So that's very exciting. This episode was written by Jonathan Sims. This aired June 13th, 2024. Brief summary, Inc. 5ol's story, Inc. Soul's story. Like I said, Inc. 5ol is written with a 5, so it's Inc. 5ol. The possible entities in this episode is the Desolation, and also various. Obviously, we'll get into that. You can also hear, can you hear this? My tabs. So in scene 1, we find Sam speaking to Alice and Celia in the break room. He's being very secretive and whispering, and he believes that the OIR were the people responsible for killing the Magnus Institute using Starkwall mercenary company. He talks about how the last case that he got, which was the Isaac Newton case, links to the protocol. There's mentions of the protocol. Sam says that he got an email with files from 1999, which contained paperwork of Starkwall, or how they used to be called back then, GSR Security. And between them and William Price, who was the former head of the, he says, response department. I assume that's meaning the OIR, considering it is the Office of Institute Assessment and Response company. I assume he's talking about the OIR or the response department that was been mentioned prior. One of those two, definitely part of the OIR at least. And they seem to be about agreement to torch the entirety of the Magnus Institute. He also mentions that the email address that sent those messages was just gibberish, which is in contrast to the first time he got a strange email, which was from a, quote, John. Throughout this, Alice gets angry and angrier that Sam's pulling her into this conspiracy. And she's angry that she's working for the government, because he's like, we're working for evil. And she's like, I know that. And she's angry that the government has done bad stuff, but she can't really do anything about it because she needs a job. Like, Sam keeps saying that we're working for an evil corporation or whatever. And she's like, I know that it's evil. And John's talking about evil in terms of bad people, eldritch side. And Alice is talking about bad colonialism, bad government, mundane side. And she's just not having it. She's like, I know it sucks to work in government. I can't do anything about it because I need a job. I need a money. Celia questions if it was a necessary evil, despite the burning of the Magnus Institute killing about 40 people, which she backs this up because she says from what Celia's found, the Magnus Institute was doing bad stuff. which we've seen at least two documents of the Magnus Institute recording different anomalies and wanting to do something with them. So that's probably what she's that's definitely what she's referencing. And when Sam questions her, like, what do you mean by that? She deflects him and asks something else and just sort of steers it away from him questioning her and what she means by like doing bad stuff, and also by from what she's found. Alice, after all this, she departs from the conversation. She's adamant to do not be involved in this conspiracy. Like, she already had to deal with the day prior Colin, who's being all conspiratorial, and she didn't like seeing that, and she does not like seeing Sam be this way either. And I mean, Sam and Celia are both like, I mean, Sam's fine; he's not going crazy. Alice is like, I don't want to be here when he does get crazy, so I'm gonna go do my work. We are behind, which was actually really cool because you could tell in the recording how she's like talking and she's like walking away and she's like, the cases are backed up. Dramatics. And so after that, Celia tells Sam to, quote, keep her posted because she's now invested. She's now interested in what's happening. Obviously, we know that she's doing something, but I don't know what it is. But at least she is now like, this is something that I should focus on a little bit more. In the second scene, we find ourselves in a very large hollow space. It sounds like a warehouse. And we hear Gwen, who walks in and finds Ink 5 tattooing someone. She goes up to them and says, are you Grace Wild? And they're like talking amongst each other. And every time, the first time that Ink, I'm just gonna call them Ink. First time Ink looks at Gwen, they're like, I don't take walk-ins. And Gwen's like, I'm not walking, I'm here with and then Ink is like, I don't need insurance. And Ink is like, I don't stop soliciting me. Gwen asks, is they okay? Are they okay? The person that you're tattooing? And Ink is like, still dead. Ink compliments Gwen's skin. They say it's perfect for Ink. Gwen offers them a position with the OIR, saying, quote, we have some use for someone of your ... type. And Ink is like, what do you mean by that? Huh? What do you mean by that? Ink gets offended, and they don't really fully know what's happening to them. Gwen calls them an external, and Ink doesn't really know what that means. They're like, what, external to society, to the world? And Gwen sort of asks how they got to this point. And Ink responds with, oh, I just like got to this warehouse. And Gwen's like, no, like, what happened? And so Ink begins to tell their story. And so for my notations, this is the first time we get a live statement, not a case. So I will write it as like the scene header, but it's not, it's specifically Ink Soul's statement. Sorry, Ink 5. And so they start talking about how they got viral after making a wolf tattoo with a small imperfection in it, and then immediately got addicted to fans and having people talk to them and compliment them, and it felt really good for them to have fans. Then they said they got haters and people trolling and people commenting bad stuff to them, and they didn't like it. After a while, after not posting much or probably not having anything like pop off virally, their follower count just sort of plateaued and then actually started to drop. And so they didn't really like that. And so they started deliberately making mistakes on their tattoos, but that just ended up having people angry at them and getting hurt from the clients. And so they started looking for other avenues of getting famous, basically. And they discovered Oscar Jarrett, who's a protege of Sutherland MacDonald, who is a pioneer tattooist in the Victorian times, who is a real person. This is the front page of the wiki. Thank you. There were rumors, Ink says, that Jarrett used human bone and strange chemicals when inking, when making tattoos, like human bone for the needle and then chemicals with the ink itself. And they write it off as like, you gotta have a brand. It's branding. It's a branding challenge. This is Drag Race. You gotta have branding here. And so when they discover Jarrett, they discover a tattoo from Jarrett, a picture of it, and saw that it was a very pristine skin on an older man. Like every other body part of the man was wrinkled from age, but that tattoo that Oscar Jared made stayed pristinely neat, as if it had not aged at all. And so the tattoo itself was an abstract sun design with a small dot made of cross-hatched lines, very small, very detailed, and the edge was ragged and wavy. And so they wanted to test it. And so the first person they tried doing that was on a client named Harry, who wanted a different design. And they're like, okay, this is the design I'm gonna put on you. And Harry's like, awesome, that's the one I wanted. And then Harry gets down to get tattooed, and then they just do it anyways without Harry's consent, which is unethical. People don't do that. So after 20 minutes of applying that tattoo on Harry, he begins to scream about it burning. And it does that for a while, and then he just sort of falls silent with pain. And then Ink just takes the pictures. What is that motion? Pictures? Like, and let's Harry go. And he sort of like stumbles away drunk. Ink sort of like was like, yeah, I mean, I didn't really keep track of him, but I heard that he died in a house fire after that. Whoops. And so, based off of the picture of the sun, they got viral again, and they became finally an influencer. And they didn't really care about the money. It was mostly about the fame. They said something along the lines of they had an inheritance, which is like, of course, rich people gotta be the crazy ones, don't they? They attempted to try to make their own designs, and none of them really popped off. But they found that only copying Jarrett's work was getting attention. And so they began to look for pictures and eventually ran out of more pictures of Jarrett's work to replicate. And so ended up finding a ledger that had the clients of Jarrett. And so they began to dig up dead bodies of former tattoo clients of Jarrett. They started just making those and popping off on the internet using Jarrett's design. And they kept talking about how it was fine for them, but their clients, the clients that had the tattoos that were copied off of Jarrett, had some quote grotesque experiences. Does not elaborate, and they thought they were fine, but then eventually the police started to notice that the people who had these grotesque experiences had just had gotten tattoos from Ink 50, and so then they started traveling, started being nomadic, and like going around different locations. Throughout that, as they kept doing more and more tattoos on people, their own tattoos began to change, and they began to feel the ink inside them. Never really talked about what they changed into. It could be that they had a tattoo and it just turned into the snake tattoo that they have that's prominent, or the snake tattoo just sort of started moving on its own. Doesn't really explain there, but I like the implication there a lot, especially because the ink is inside them. I like that a lot. Ink soul, ink 50. And so then they began to relish in the fear in the clients while doing that tattoo. And so they mentioned how like whenever you have someone that they want to tattoo, the look that they get right before of fear, they enjoyed that. They enjoyed seeing that sort of emotion, terror, dread, hopelessness in their clients. And that sounds like someone who is enjoying and drawing from fear. Mm-hmm. Now, any of their work has some effect as Jarrett's. They, after feeling that change in their own tattoos and this ink in their soul, their own designs are popping off as well as Jarrett's, infused with that sort of Jarrettness that they got, and it's changing them. And there's a small part of them that does worry, but now they enjoy what their life is, and they want to keep going to see the look. And it's very much like they don't know what's happening to them, but they are enjoying it, and it's terrifying, but it's great. And maybe an allegory of addiction here. Definitely something we've seen before. In scene 4, which is right after the statement ends, Gwen says that it seems that they've tapped into a sort of power, which Lena had told Gwen before that there are some benevolent forces and some not benevolent forces, so Gwen's tying it back to that vague ass explanation. And Ink says that that's fucking obvious. Don't you have anything better for me? Ink is also like, hey, maybe next time find someone who knows more to help me. And because of that, Gwen gets a little pushy, and she pushes for the offer for the OIR work and threatens Ink with being forgotten. She's like, if you don't sign up, you're just gonna be a has been. And which was like when I heard that, I was like, ooh, she really said that. She really said that to them. And then Ink sort of like stops and looks at her, and Ink's and Ink's like, you got some nice skin there. So Ink threatens back, and Gwen totally folds. Like, Gwen was hitting off so strong, and the moment that Ink is like giving the energy back, Gwen just like, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. All bark, no bite, girl. I've seen someone like you. That's a reference to Jonathan Sims, head archivist of the Magnus Institute, London. And then they say, this is the time. This is the moment you run, threatening Gwen, and then the recording stops. The episode ends. So notes. This is formal confirmation that Starkwall burnt down the Magnus Institute, which I don't really fully remember if I thought of that. I know I did not. I don't know if anyone else thought of that in the fandom, but that definitely makes sense, especially because Sam had found before stuff about Starkwall and quote the protocol in regards to Magnus Institute. So that's more formal confirmation. Now it's canon. Starkwall killed the Magnus Institute, which is big news. And so if we follow down some more paths and more theories that I have, if the OIR is managing the bad guys, the Magnus Institute probably was pushing too far into like bad people territory, bad guy territory, and they were like, they need to be removed. If they cannot be controlled, they must be removed. Which is a thing you probably would see in like conservations. Like if this thing cannot be controlled, it must be removed. A la oil spills or invasive animals. You know, like if something is really bad for an environment, if it is natural, unfortunately, we still have to remove it to help for the greater good. How greater good is the removal of the Magnus Institute to this world? We don't know yet. We shall see. This, of course, also connects to the last episode, which is the destruction of Newton's Diana's tree, which was occurred like the protocol of burning stuff down happened to Newton's stuff. It's still unclear what Celia is doing, but she does believe in Sam, and this info helps the theory craft more. And so, consequence of me being on the fandom, and consequence, of course, by definition, does not mean anything good or bad. And I'm this connotation of consequence right now is just neutral, I guess. Just me being in the fandom. Episode 7 may be another act of action of the protocol to stop the ritual from happening. Obviously, I did not really realize or theorize that the episode 7, give or take, the Hilltop Center charity shop, was it? Having collected a bunch of things. I didn't really glean that as a ritual, but like people on Tumblr thought of that, and so I do agree with them. So like I'm not taking credit for that theory that that was a ritual. What kind of ritual? I don't really know. I can probably fathom that it is some sort of ritual to try to get multiple fears through, because a lot of the objects within the charity shop had different aspects that could point to different things. So there's not much information on that yet. So that's just more speculation. This is what I'm speculating there. But it looks like probably Starkwall, enacted the protocol to stop that ritual. And Alice's refusal to follow Sam is very interesting character-wise, because we've always seen her as like a jokey character, but the moment that things get serious, she gets serious, and I do like that because you can tell that the way that she carries herself is not an act per se, but a defense mechanism to like the bad stuff that's happening to her life, aka working for the government that she doesn't really support. And she's also rejecting a lot of things just to maintain safety, maintain that feeling of safety, which I fully support. I fully support her doing that. Ink 5 is an avatar for all entities? Question mark. This is also a thing that I did not clean myself. This was also a Tumblr thing. Something I read on Tumblr that maybe they're called externals because they're avatars. Avatar equals external. Avatars draw power from the entities which are external to the world, to our world. So instead of calling them avatars, they call them externals because they draw power from external forces. That's I like that theory a lot as well. It seems that Ink 5 is more of general fear, and they don't fully control exactly what they are doing when they do that too, but they enjoy the fear all the same. So it seems to be like equal opportunity avatar, because we've only seen specifically. Well, I'll get to the tattoos, but definitely very much like they're not claiming one specific entity. They're just doing stuff that empowers all the entities, and specifically because the entities are only a taxonomic separation, it could be just the one entity of the fear, the dread power, singular, and not imposing any sort of boundaries to that. You know, Harry's tattoo was desolation. Obviously, that's a very obvious one there. Fire, burning, burning houses down, etc. Sun. When I heard about the cross lines, cross hatch lines in the circle, I thought spiral at first, with like the wavy edges and stuff like that. But no, it's definitely desolation with the burning and stuff. So the former clients we've seen of Ink 5 are from 2 making adjustments, which was tabs are perfect. Davia. My writing is not the best. I think it's Daria. Sorry, Daria, who made the tattoo, who had the tattoo of like the paintbrush, and she started changing her own facial features and body structure. That was very terrifying. And 16 Antisocial with Madame Madame Electrum, episode 16. I got tabs now, so I can look up 16 real quickly. Yes, Madame Electrum with the tattoo that we didn't get a description of, but I assume it was something about their heart, like probably like a heart design or something like that. Those were 2 previous clients of making adjustments, so we add Harry now onto that list. And we've also seen Ink 5 digging up dead bodies in 11 Marked, which is where they find the body of a client of Oscar Jarrett's with their back tattooed with a ship and something chasing the ship. And again, 16 Antisocial. They don't actually like we don't see them digging up a body there, but they're looking to do that. And with 2 making adjustments, probably Flash, and 16 Antisocial. I probably want to say at the end or something like that. And then 11 Marked, probably the Vast, maybe. And the way that they talk about it, obviously, they don't really know what's happening. They don't really know what's changing, but they can feel like something's changing and they like it, but that's still scary to them because they don't really understand. And we've seen avatars that didn't really know about the fears gaining powers. Off the top of my head, when I was writing these notes, I thought of obviously Jane Prentice because we got in episode 32 Hive the talk about the hives and I itch all the time, and like she doesn't really know about the corruption, but she still became an avatar for the corruption. She doesn't even know the name of it, but she understands the fear of it and the change that occurred to her. Also, off the top of my head was Hezekiah Wakely, who became an avatar of the buried in Gravedigger's Envy, and he didn't really know about the buried. He had a dream about getting like suffocated by mud while he was digging graves, and he enjoyed it and became an avatar of the buried. And those were the top 2 off the top of my head. And then I like looked up other avatars and there's a handful, a lot more than I thought, that like really didn't like know the entity that they were serving, such as Justin Go, who was in 113. That sounds wrong. Breathing room, when he suffocates in a tent from carbon dioxide, I think, and he becomes an avatar of the end, going around killing other people so that he stays alive, I think. Callum Brody, who became an avatar of the dark after his experience with Maxwell Rayner, because after that, he just became a bully and stuck kids into dark places because he wanted them to feel afraid as well. And so he became an avatar of the dark in season 5. Tova McHugh, similar to Justin Go, became an avatar of the end, not really knowing about the end, and she just wanted to stay alive and was killing other people to maintain her own life, similar to Justin Go. But she just justified it as like, I want to survive and I'm doing really good in life. I'm doing good for people. I should survive, which, okay, girl. And then like I was thinking about it, and yeah, Jared Hopworth really doesn't know about the flesh either. He's never talked about the flesh before. He talked about meeting other people, and he mentions how they invited him to come to the ritual, but he didn't really care for that. And so when he started becoming this weird, grotesque, fucking hot flesh avatar, he didn't really know what was happening. He never mentioned the flesh. He just mentioned about meat and bones and stuff. And I don't think he knows about the flesh. So that's, there's a handful of other examples, but those were the ones that I wanted to talk about in terms of avatars who did not know the entity they were serving. Gwen's fine. She's fine. Yeah, Ink 5 is threatening her with getting tattoos on her body, but she's fine. Nothing's gonna happen to her. If I'm wrong, I won't admit that until episode 24. And then some extra thing that I also got from the Tumblr. In episode 18, Teddy mentions that they work in Royal Mint Court, which is where the OIR is. And someone found on the internet that the Royal Mint Court was built by a handful of other people, including Robert Smirk. So, yeah. Don't know what to make of that, but definitely that's some interesting detail. And that's the end of my notes. And ending remarks. Let's see. I hope that we get more about Colin. We started getting some stuff about Colin, but not enough. We're definitely getting more about Gwen's mental state, and this is also a part of like her going to Lena and asking like, "Hey, can you like get me some security?" And Lena's like, "No." Well, we see now the consequence of not having security and also not having all the information. Lena's setting Gwen up, and that's really sad to see. Like during Pride Month, seriously, doing that to a Bouchard, unkind, homophobic, rude, other explicitive towards Lena. Not, I can't think of any more. But like, why do that to our Gwen? Why do that to our Gwen? So hopefully Gwen gets no tattoos, and if she does get a tattoo, it's a really nice tattoo. And hopefully it doesn't do anything to her. Also, shout out to Vera Chalk, who is the voice actor for Ink 5 Ol. They did a really good job on delivering this influencer in a way that felt grounded yet extravagant. I don't know how to say it. They were really good. They were really good at what their voice acting. And I can't wait to see what happens in the next 4 episodes. So stay away from bad tattoos, evil tattoos, and I'll see you later.